there's a Chinese on the edge martial art, and I love what it's called. It's called Mad Dog Fist. That's kind of like the
Okay.
Chinese translation,
Yeah.
Mad Dog Fist. And if you I can't share. If you just Google it, you'll find some people doing it. And it's from this guy who was, beaten up as a child, then started to do kind of kung fu and stuff, and then saw his kung fu master get beaten up by like 6 kids, and was like, "Hang on, this isn't really like this isn't what I'm taught. Like, I want to actually." So and then he's basically spent the last like 30 odd years like really exploring like what is true self defense, and he's got something called Mad Dog Fist. And the whole thing about it is like in a real street fight, in a real kind of moment, like what you really need to do. And it's about making completely random movements. So that when you see them, it just looks like they're jerking about, and it's just intentionally random movements, making like crazy sounds, like crazy sounds, like literally like that, and also just grabbing whatever's around you. Like one of his favorite things to use is like a a carpenter's square.
Yeah, right. I
Triangle,
mean,
and
you're
just
unlikely to have
in
one
the
to hand,
eyeballs.
but yeah, I can see how
Yeah,
that'd
yeah.
be dangerous.
He's like, F it. It's all it'll do. The first thing you've got to do to get into his training classes is because it's China. You have to read and memorize the Chinese law regarding self-defense.
Well,
You have
that's
to
very
memorize it.
sensible.
Yeah, very sensible.
Yeah.
And it's the only martial art in the world with an official kill list, because over the years he's had students who have killed people, and they've not gone to prison because it's been provable that it's self-defense.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
all crazy stuff, like this guy, like somebody, he's killed 12 people with Mad Dog Fist in like one attack. And it's like apparently really easy to teach. Like women love being taught it because it's like it's like practical, and like in like 5 lessons you can learn Mad Dog Fist. And I've wanted to learn that for quite a while, but I can't find anything.
You be careful what you do with that power.
Yeah, Mad
It
Dog.
makes a lot of sense though, because my neighbor
Yeah.
who I just mentioned, who does, what did I just say it was? Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah.
One of the interesting statements that caught my attention the other day was he said the most dangerous people in jiu-jitsu are white belts because they don't know what they're doing and they're completely unpredictable. And I thought, okay,
you're like, well,
that's it. Good tip.
okay.
I'll make sure I don't get too good.
Because when I saw the guy who like refused to go on the ground, it was like the other people couldn't figure out what to do because they were in the tournament, and they were like, "Listen, we get on the ground, and then I do all these moves, and then I win."
Yeah,
And then they just couldn't figure it out. So it was fascinating.
that seems very
Yeah.
crazy. I like the psychological element's really interesting as well. There's a thing that Darren Brown sometimes talks about. Darren Brown, the illusionist.
Oh yeah.
He says that he said apparently he did this once, and he says that this is something you should do if ever you're like in a situation where there's somebody on the street, like at night in an alleyway or something, and you feel threatened by them. Is you say something so random that it like trips their brain, and they don't know what to do with it, and it like diffuses because they're like they've psyched themselves up to attack you or do something or mug you or whatever.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah.
And they're in a zone, and you break the spell of that zone in their mind.
Yeah.
And then they kind of get confused and they don't know what to do. And he tells this story of how this guy he thought was going to mug him, and he just looked straight at him and said, "The wall outside my garden is not very high." And apparently this guy just like broke down in tears and started sobbing. I don't know if this is a true story, but this is what he told. And I was like, okay, I'll remember that.
If I was mugging you and you said the wall outside my garden is very high, I'd be like, God, this is going to be a lot of effort. I'm going to move on.
I know, but well, that's my garden is
I
not
don't know
very
what's
high.
going to happen here. Let me find somebody else to.
Yeah,
confusing.
It's too difficult. I'll go next door.
Difficult. Yeah, go next door.
Anyway, that sounds like a good way of segueing into today's topic, which is, are we in the end times? And if so, what does end times mean, and what should we do about it? And I'll just quickly say, because there's a lot of places we could go with this. The reason I propose this topic is because of two things. One, I think there's a bunch of interesting stuff that's going on around now, both kind of very right now, but also kind of just generally this time in history, that that sort of references or has parallels with various kind of belief systems regarding end time prophecies, but also because if there is anything that ties in with sustainability and spirituality, it is end time prophecy. I mean, it's like sustainability is literally about how to avoid things getting to like the point where we're like, oh shit, it's game over, which is what end times really means. It's about trying to keep everything going and avoiding these like catastrophic problems. But then there's also a bunch of weird stuff throughout history, including currently, that sort of ties in with various interesting belief systems, some of which I'll just admit, some of which I resonate with me more than others, shall we say. um, but they're very, very interesting. And I think even if you think they're like crazy and mumbo jumbo religious nonsense, they give insights into how some other people think and what might be driving certain behaviors and dynamics in our world. So, so that's why I thought it'd be an interesting topic to dig into.
Have you got your cyanide pills ready? Are we ready to like end? You know, I want to end it with a. No, I don't want to end it like that. But...
No, I don't. But I do know. I do have a friend who's sadly he died last year in his 90s. But he used to talk. He was very paranoid about various things, including climate change. He was like a really, really hardcore kind of environmental campaigner. Who really inspired me in many ways, but I also didn't really like his apocalyptic mindset in certain aspects of things. And he used to talk about how during the Cold War, he had cyanide pills in a little tin for all of his family, his wife and his kids.
For the in case a nuclear bomb went
in case
off.
There was in case there was a nuclear war. Yeah. Which I understand, but I also it's like I don't want to go down that. I don't want to get to the point where I actually do think things are that bad. Crikey. But interestingly, maybe that's an interesting kind of thing, because just to dwell on that, the doomsday clock, which is maintained by the
You've mentioned that
Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Yeah. I find it interesting that now I think this may be partly cultural. It's not entirely scientific, even though it is managed by scientists. That the doomsday clock is closer to midnight, which means like kind of nuclear apocalypse, basically, than it's ever been, including in the Cold War. So actually it seems like, I can kind of see how in the Cold War maybe somebody would have thought like my friend did. But actually we're theoretically closer to that point now than we were then, but we seem a lot less worried about it. So
what's been their rationale for making it closer? Like, there's...
I think they take into...
I imagine the Cold War, was a pretty... I think there was... I don't know. What was their rationale?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. This is why I say I think it's partly cultural, not entirely scientific, because it's basically, I think it's like effectively like a panel of atomic scientists that get together and they review current kind of geopolitical issues. And then the last one they updated it was 2024, I think, so last year. And they moved it to whatever it is now, like very, very close to midnight, because of what's going on with like Russia and America and the Middle East, and then there's also like tensions with China. So I think you've got like it's sort of a multipolar, threat rather than the bipolar threat you had in the Cold War. But at the same time, it feels to me like it was a bit more direct during the Cold War. It's a bit more kind of blatant, sort of nuclear face-off. So I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. was anybody paying attention? Did anybody? I don't think any. I think I saw a little clip on the news that they had shifted the clock, and then it was within 10 minutes. I think it left the news cycle, and then I think it goes to show, like my attention span, this year is also like the attention that people are paying. I mean, do people go back to the? I don't know. Was there more you wanted to elaborate on the topic, or should we go into questions or something? Or yeah, I want to leave space in case there was more you wanted to elaborate on the topic or bring into.
Of the topic of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist, the Doomsday Clock,
No,
or more broadly,
the
end
whole
times.
arc broadly, end times. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the current thing, other than that, I think the more current thing, which is really interesting, is what's going on in Israel.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it?
And that
The
gets
red heifers.
the red heifers. It gets super, super weird. So now anybody listening might think, what are they talking about? Red heifers? What? Sure. Which is essentially a red cow. And so basically the Old Testament book of Numbers has various kind of descriptions of what happens at the end times, and certain things that need to happen in sequence in order to bring about the return of the Messiah. And this is something that both sort of certain sects of devout Jews as well as devout Christians sort of believe in for their different reasons. In Judaism, it's essentially about return of the Messiah, not return of. It's about bringing forward the
end of
the sort of the end of these times, and then the Messiah will come. Whereas for Christians, it's sort of the same thing, but it's sort of the return of Jesus. So it's sort of a different perspective on the similar dynamic. But what has to happen? There's a bunch of things that have to happen in this prophecy to bring about the end times. One of which is that they basically, in Israel, on the Hill of Olives, they have to sacrifice an unblemished, unworked red cow, essentially. And these are extremely rare. Like, they can't have a single hair that isn't red. And they have to be checked by like a special rabbi who will sign it off as like, this is an end of times red cow. Yeah, this is an end of times red cow. It fits the official technical specification. They have to have a location which is on the Hill of Olives, basically overlooking the Temple Mount, which is where you currently have the Dome of the Rock. And then they have to sacrifice the red heifer, and in a specific way. And then there's various rituals that follow that lead to the construction of the third temple, which is a new temple on the Temple Mount, which means demolishing the Dome of the Rock, which is the third most important Islamic temple as far as I understand. So it's like a huge point of tension between the Islamic world and the Jewish world, I guess. But also Christian, like kind of fundamentalist Christian world. Go on. Well, the reason it gets super weird in terms of like right now is because obviously there's like geopolitical, economic aspects to what's going on in Gaza, and just generally with Israel and its relationships with its neighbors and so on. You've got really weird stuff going on in terms of like these red heifers are super weird, but there's been some project to breed them in America, to try to breed like these perfect heifers. It was in 2022, some breeder in Texas basically like announced that like I've got some calves have been born, 5 calves that are perfect. He sold them to some project that basically funded bringing them over to Israel, which is technically illegal because it's live animal export, like live cattle export, which you're not supposed to do. The Israeli government basically gave exceptions to it and classified them as a pet import in order to get around their own regulations. So it's super weird. Netanel Isaac, Director General of the Ministry of Jerusalem Affairs and Heritage, gave a speech at the airport on arrival of the red heifers, basically welcoming them to the country, welcoming the cows to the country, and And he also admitted that his ministry had been funding the development of the Mount of Olives area, where they were building this, what do you call it? The sort of the platform on which they do the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So it's all super weird. And then a Hamas spokesman, Abu Abaida, in 2024, he made a statement where he basically referenced the red heifers as like one of the things that Hamas is concerned about in terms of why they're like pushing now, because they basically want to stop the prophecy from being fulfilled. And then you've got the weird stuff about Benjamin Netanyahu, who developed this sort of very close relationship with a guy nicknamed the Rebbe, who was the most powerful, what do you call it? Hasidic Jew in America, kind of in the late 20th century. And this man told him that he was going to become prime minister when he was like a young diplomat.
Yeah.
Told him in the 80s, I think, you're going to become the prime minister of Israel in 1996. And you're going to be the last prime minister of Israel, and you will hand over rule to the Messiah. And then he did become prime minister of Israel in 1996, but then he got knocked out, and then he came back in, stayed in for a long time. Then he got knocked out, and now he's back in with this like weird kind of coalition with some like really right wing group, and he's gone seemingly completely crazy. Yeah, and then there's a whole bunch of people talking about the war of Gog and Magog, which is in the book of Ezekiel, and it's basically this like end times battle where all of Israel's neighbors, effectively, all these nations surrounding Israel, the land of Israel, basically gang up and try to destroy it, and then eventually God comes to save them. George W. Bush referred to this in 2003 in a phone call with Jacques Chirac. And apparently, said when referring to like the invasion of Iraq and like, Gog and Magog are at work and so on, like, and then apparently Jacques Chirac was so confused he didn't know what George W. Bush was talking about, and he had to basically get some like civil servants to go and like start speaking to like religious scholars to find out what is this all about.
And it's not like George W. Bush was a particularly well read person. It almost feels like he was fed that.
It feels like he was fed that.
Something, regurgitating something which he assumed was something that Jacques Chirac was like obvious. I mean, how much do you have to be fed this story for you then to go to another world leader and just casually talk about some biblical terminology in the assumption that, well, of course he knows about it, because all I'm hearing about is Gog, or whatever it was you just mentioned. So
Gog and Magog.
Gog and Magog. So imagine how much he was fed this information.
Absolutely. And, yeah. And America's a very strange place. I mean, everywhere's a strange place in its own way, but I think like in terms of from a British point of view, the sort of religious extremism, Christian extremism particularly is when I say extremism, I don't mean like in the terrorist sense, but I mean just in a kind of like very although we made certain wars
exactly what you call a
maybe all right, it's religious extremism in America.
Religious extremism,
seems to be on another level.
I mean, breeding some red heifers to bring on the end of world times is extremism, perhaps terrorism.
I think that counts. I think that counts.
I think it's a fairly extreme position to take. The end of the world.
And so people fall into different camps on this. The main one is that people are completely oblivious to it because it doesn't really get talked about in the news or anything. And it sounds crazy. So even if it gets brought up, like people listening now are probably like, okay, I'm gonna tune out of the House of Light podcast. They've gone mad. But then there's other people who are like maybe think maybe there are end times coming and maybe this is prophecy coming true. And then there are people who think that perhaps it's just an excuse for certain people in power to do what they want to do, or maybe they think that people in power believe in the prophecies. In fact, I even saw an interview or a clip of Benjamin Netanyahu where he made a statement about how that he has a responsibility and people like in power like him have a responsibility to fulfill the prophecies. So it's like self-fulfilling prophecy, because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Bibles or whichever religious book you're reading says that this is going to happen at a certain time. And then if you believe in that and you're a person in power, you think, well, it was my job to then make it come true. So there's different ways of looking at it. I don't know which is the correct way. But I think it's super
Well,
interesting.
we could talk about this from the perspective of we believe the prophecies to be true. We could talk about it from the perspective of that. We could talk about it from the perspective of we don't believe the prophecies are true, but believe people believe in the prophecies.
Yeah, right.
We can talk about the perspective of we don't believe that it's true. We believe the people who are actively using the prophecies also don't believe it's true, and they're just leveraging it as a paragraph. It's multiple levels. I just think I had two thoughts to pop to mind. One of them, if everything is true, let's just put the mind everything we just said is true. It puts everything that's going on in Israel and Gaza. I mean, it puts into context, which is it's a holy war.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
literally is a holy war from the perspective of people in Hamas, and also from the perspective of people, specifically maybe the more orthodox people in Israel, but like specifically people surrounding Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, which
They
would be a
see it as a
minority,
holy war.
but nevertheless a minority that
Yeah,
have very strong beliefs.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a holy war, and I think that then puts it into perspective. I mean, people are, how can these things happen? And I think these things can happen once you have a bunch of people who are who believe. We're trying to. Oftentimes, I think even with Israel and Israel, let's say Israel, we're trying to rationalize or understand the rational argument for what's going on over there. And then the problem is that there is no rational argument for what's going on over there, because you have to look at it from the perspective of religion and holy war. You have to look at it from the perspective of this isn't a people, and I think there is enough. And I posted something about it recently. There's enough people out there that in it. This isn't like a fringe thought throughout Israel. It is like a fundamental part of their being, that the arguments for Israel's existence stem from religious arguments.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Fundamentally stem from religious arguments. And so it makes it very hard to have these kind of like. Then you're trying to have like a rational conversation of, I don't think you should kill children, but it doesn't really land, because it's like that's not the way. It's not. It's just no one cares. It's like, well, it's the end of times, so
Yeah.
if you've got to kill a couple of thousand, tens of thousands of children, it's all right. It's the end of times. It justifies like the whole thing, and it justifies. I mean, throughout history, this belief, this sense of purpose that people are given, religious fervor, this belief in something greater, it can drive them to do like the worst things on the planet. Nobody who committed an atrocity,
What?
yeah. No one, yeah, no one who had ever committed one of those, didn't believe that they were fulfilling some greater purpose. I mean,
Yeah.
let's talk about Hitler. People like talk about Hitler as if he was just some inherently evil person who just wanted to do evil things. I'm not agreeing with any of the things that he believed in. I'm just saying that he believed in them. He believed in
there's always a powerful belief system behind these atrocities, which often is, it's not purely just about money and power. There's often some sort of, whether it's religious or occult, or other sort of belief system, or even like political, or even, just sort of social ideology, but there's an ideology or a belief system behind it. Yeah.
But I think it's more than just an ideology, because it's like, if you were to die it's something maybe that you're willing to give your life for, or your death for. That kind of driving force of a human being is extremely powerful, extremely powerful, and it kind of breaks through a lot of social conventions. It breaks through a lot of things and enables people to do beautiful things, horrific things, because it breaks through all of those. And I think that's then it's hard to have like a rational conversation about it, because you can't have a rational. I mean, how do you have a rational conversation with somebody who's willing to die for a cause? That's kind of a very powerful,
Yeah.
extremely powerful.
And
Yeah, I don't know.
it
How do you
almost
resolve that?
has to be it almost has to be on some level a spiritual belief. And I'm including like religious beliefs in that. Like to be prepared to die for something, to die for your children or, or
Yeah.
your loved ones. I think that's that's tangible and understandable that somebody would be
Mm,
prepared to do that. But once you kind of expand out away from people that where you're like directly trying to defend, protect the people that you love the most, and you're still prepared to die for it, that means you think
mm.
there's something beyond this
Beyond
life or
death.
beyond death
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
that is
Rewarding
linked to
you?
your actions in this life that somehow
Yeah.
makes it worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Is it? Yeah. I don't think anybody's dying with the knowledge, or maybe not. Maybe a few people dying with the knowledge that they're going to have a terrible afterlife for like a million
yeah,
years. They're looking for the They're
yeah,
looking for the positive. It's an investment now for like a positive return later on.
exactly,
In some
exactly.
afterlife. And I mean, we can look at it from that perspective. I mean, yeah, that whole. I mean, there's also the story that when you go once you start. There's a really interesting guy on YouTube. His YouTube handle does not really reflect the quality of the material that goes in it, but it's called Useful Charts.
Okay,
Is the is the YouTube handle, and he does like very visual guides, and he's Jewish as well. Does very visual guides on kind of the nature of it, and especially from the perspective of religion. And he did a great story on like what's the difference in Sunnis and Shiites, and kind of walking it through, and what's the difference, and were there 12 tribes of Israel, and what was the story behind that, and he starts it off with, well, this is what the religious texts say, and I suppose if you believe the religious texts, stop watching now, because I'm now gonna talk about it from the perspective of, well, the scholarly, more academic perspective of what was going on in those time periods. And a lot of the stories that um there was like an almost canonized there was almost like there was almost a canonization of the Jewish text, the same way there was a canonization of the Christian text. And obviously, if you're
mm.
listening to this and you're very religious, this is the point you stop listening, because it doesn't make sense, and he does the same with the Quran. Is like, if you don't believe, let's just examine the Quran from the perspective of the other stories. Was it a canonized version of stories that were just spreading around the area that kind of got canonized into the Quran? And so a lot of like he argues that a lot of and there's scholarly belief here as well. A lot of this stuff was just stories that were floating about, and then thousands of years ago it got canonized into these prophecies, these books. And then I find religion so fascinating. I just find the whole concept so fascinating, that, and if you do believe it from that perspective, which was, there were lots of stories floating around. Like, for one of them is like, Moses wasn't kind of like one of the prophets. There was just originally there were like 3 or 4 origin stories for this collection of what we now call Judeo-Christo-Islam. There was just a bunch of origin stories, and they all went, do you know what? Let's just pretend. Let's just say they all happened one after the other instead of being origin stories. Um, And like a bunch of people went, yeah, all right, that sounds like it makes sense. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, yeah. Now I suppose we're one of them.
The
And
editing
and now
process.
this is editing process. But then, like, millions of years, not millions, thousands of years later, we just have millions of people on the planet who believe in a particular story. And you go and like in Islam, there's like the Sunnis and the Shiites, and the Shiites and the Sunnis. And I know I'm probably going to get jihaded for this. The Shiites and the Sunnis, the difference between the two is like, Muhammad said, "Oh, this dude's my successor," and it didn't happen that way. Some other dude became the successor. And the Shiites are the ones that go, well, no, Muhammad said this dude is the successor, so we're those folk. And the other folk are like, no, this guy's a successor. Years later, Sunnis and Shiites hate each other.
Yeah.
And you're like,
tragic.
It's tragic.
What are we arguing over? What are they arguing?
Yeah, what are we arguing?
Yeah.
Like you agree more than you disagree on like so many topics. But I eat my mango this way, you eat my mango this way, we hate each other. So it's like
it's jam and cream on a scone, isn't it? And is it even called a scone or is it a scone? You know?
Yeah.
I'll stake my life on it.
It's this, and I'm going way off topic, but I think it's the same as kind of nationalism. I'm really going off topic here. It's the same as nationalism. I think what's going on is this, and I have like a theory, which is like most people think they're worthless. Most people think they're worthless in life. You're kind of inside. It's kind of like, I'm not worthy to be here. There's something. And then you get told, no, because you're X, that imbues worth upon you. And X is actually better than Y. So I'm British. And being British is brilliant. You should
be proud.
You know, you should be proud of being British. And then you're like, yeah, I'm worthy. I'm British. Not because of some inherent property. And so then you're like, yeah, I'm Muslim. I'm brilliant. I'm because I follow this code. That's who I am. I'm brilliant. I'm better than the Christians, and I'm better than the Jewish people. And then it's kind of like it's like we're defining ourselves and our self-worth through, I don't know. We're trying desperately throughout life to feel worthy, and we're taking on a religion, we're taking on a nationalism, we're taking on some other belief system that makes me better than you, and that gives me my worth. And I don't know if I've gone massively off topic, but that's kind of like roughly how I think about the whole. And why does nationalism take hold? It's because I think we're just desperate. But
it does tie in,
keep on going.
Because ultimately, this whole thing about end times, that part of it could be environmental. There's obviously there's a whole bunch of stuff around in various cultures around kind of earth changes, like floods and earthquakes and such things.
Things have happened.
Things that just happen, and then there's things that are very much man-made, where we fight amongst ourselves and there's some big battle, and that comes from exactly what you're describing, is that people get so caught up in these stories about, like, no, we're the chosen ones, no, and they're like, no, we're the chosen ones, that eventually people end up killing each other, which is literally the most obscene thing that humans can do. And somehow we still haven't outgrown it as a species. It's still going on today. And I think when you frame, what's going on with Israel as a holy war, it actually kind of makes more sense. I'm not saying that's, people listening, I'm not saying that's necessarily correct or incorrect. It just is an interesting perspective because some of the acts seem so disproportionate and grotesque and irrational that it's almost like there are very few explanations you can actually put on it where you say, oh yeah, that most other wars I can look at and I can like kind of research things and come to some sort of sense of like, oh, okay, I think maybe this was the motivation of why this side is doing this and why that side is doing that. And there's normally some sort of economic, geopolitical kind of aspect to it. Whereas this seems so disproportionate, including not just like what's going on in Gaza, but like other stuff, I mean, firing a missile at Doha is like one of your closest allies. It literally has a military base there to defend you. It's like, at this point, that nothing's making any sense at all. And
it just also goes to show how far the international norms are so fragile. Like we just
Yeah.
assume that countries won't, but it's just it isn't. Um, but also that you've we just remember I spoke at Israel once, twice actually. I've been to Israel twice. I can talk about very uncomfortable
For a
moments.
conference.
Two conferences, yeah, yeah. Oh, I also managed teams in Israel as well. It was for me to go to. I think I went to, when my first trip to Israel was very eye opening because I was like very open minded. I think I just finished an ayahuasca ceremony, and I was in one of my
Good
the
timing.
world is beautiful and
Yeah.
we're all just connected, and so I was like going in with that kind of mindset of like just really wanting to be like open minded and like, look, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna see what it's really like, and I think people don't. Have I told you this story? I think people don't.
I don't think so.
My first experience was I went to Heathrow Airport. Oh, my first mistake I made was I took El Al. I booked El Al, the Israeli airline, the national airline. And when you take El Al, you go to Heathrow Airport. It's got its own separate secure check-in with security guards with guns. This is before, this was like very unusual. I was like, what the hell is going on? I feel already like in a strange situation. And I
Okay.
went in, and then pre-check-in, there was like a pre security check. And then I started to get grilled by them. Why are you going? And I was at Microsoft. I was like, why are you going to Israel? I'm speaking. Do you work at Microsoft? Yeah. Can you show me some evidence? Yeah. Here's my badge. Here's this. I was literally on the Microsoft website. You go to Microsoft, you could see my face. You could see everything on there. I showed them everything. Like half an hour later, still like she kept on going away and doing other checks and coming back. I haven't checked in yet. She's coming back,
You
and
haven't
then
checked in.
I haven't
Crikey.
checked in. I'm like trying to get to the check-in desk, and she goes, "You're giving a talk." I went, "Yeah, and here's the website. I'm on the website. It was like a major conference." And then she goes, "Oh, what talk are you giving?" I said, "Oh, Angular Web Framework." Is that how you make websites? She goes, "Oh, right. Can you give me the talk?" And I was like, "What?" Because yeah, can you give me the talk? And I was like, "All right." And I took my laptop out and I literally started presenting the talk to
Wow.
her. And at this time, I'm like, it's my bank of like open heartedness is just like being eaten away. I was still there. It was still fully open hearted. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to give it like, and by the end, another one of her colleagues just came and just tapped her on the shoulder and spoke in Hebrew to her and pointed behind me. And behind me, there was a massive queue of Orthodox Jews who were looking really pissed off because they'd had to wait behind me. And she goes, "Oh, okay." And then she quickly wrapped up and went off. And I said, "Listen, what was that all about?" And she goes, "Extra security." She goes, "Does every airline that go to Israel have the security?" She goes, "No, just El Al." So I just won't take El Al in the future. She goes, "Oh no, we have other kind of like positive benefits and da da da." And I was like, I just won't take this airline again."
Yeah.
So I went in, I got through, and this is good. So got through security, landed on the other side. Immediately, it was like it. You get taken to a corner, and like 3, 4, 5 hours of just interrogation before you get through, and everybody looks like me
Does
through.
everybody go through
And
this?
no, only people who look like me. There was another guy who was from
Yeah. It's,
Google, whose parents, whose great grandfather was Jordanian. And he went through and he said that they properly grilled him. They spake to his face that you are a terrorist. You're coming here to blow up something. He goes, no, I work at Google. I'm giving a talk on. So that's that way. On the way back, it was crazy because it was like there are two queues. One for people who it was in the it was kind of like the time of like DEI was like really heavy handed and everybody was talking about it. And I was like, well, hang on, we're you're talking about DEI, but we've just got this kind of what is obviously like a pretty racist situation here where like one type of people, I was in a queue and two white German guys were there and they said, listen, I think we're in the wrong queue. And they went, oh yeah, you are. And they took them out and put them into the fast track queue. And I went into the other queue. And that was kind of my first experience, and there was other things happened there as well. But then my second one was I went to I went again, and by that time I'd actually started working with like an Israeli charity that mentors Palestinians, and I was like, for me to engage in this situation, I need to have like a positive aspect to it. So I went to this conference, Wix, I think it was Wix, which is the website designer, Wix or
Yeah,
Wiz or
Wix.
something. Wix, yeah.
Wix.
I went
Yeah.
to speak at their conference, and I kind of like gave a big speech about this. Please help mentor Palestinians, and it was very uncomfortable because it was kind of like a bunch of forced laughter. But it was like some resort conference. I'm getting to the point because I think it was quite interesting. We went out. We were outside. It was kind of some downtime. It was like a resort area, and something happened in the sky, and it was like I only looked up too late. I saw the contrails. It was like two contrails and some sort of explosion in the middle. And it was
Was the Iron Dome?
it was the Iron Dome. It was
Wow.
like that. Something had happened and something had hit it. And I was like, holy shit. I looked around and every Israeli was just standing there and just looking up at this explosion in the sky, like right there. And I tell you what thought just crossed my mind at that moment. And the thought that crossed my mind was, this is how you control a population. That's the thought that popped into my mind. This is how you control a
That's
population.
interesting. So that's what going through your head.
Because if you're, imagine, I just think, because I can just take a plane and go away. I can take a plane and go away. If I lived there and I saw evidence of the threat to myself, to my nation, to my people, like on a constant basis, I imagine how I would think. I mean, I would think like that. And then you've got all the material. I think of Israel as like a brainwashed population. I think of like a brainwashed population. And so, anyway, I don't know where I was going.
Well, I think that about most populations, probably all.
Yeah.
And some are probably just more extremely brainwashed than others.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like North Korea. Well, it's like North Korea. Like, how can North Korea be North Korea? Because it's every population's, you're right, a bit brainwashed. It's a propaganda everywhere.
Yeah,
and I
including this thing you were saying about like, oh, I'm proudly British. It's that's
proudly British. That's propaganda. And through that, you can convince a population to do anything you want. You can convince them. Nazi Germany. I mean, nothing. It's the same Germans that exist today. It's not like they didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't change as a population. What changed was like the information that they were being fed.
Yeah.
And the consensus reality of their agreement, of what's good and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's really tragic. And I'm coming from the perspective that like I don't know what the true motivations are for what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that about most things these days. Like, well, whatever I think I know, unless I'm in the room with the people who truly are making these decisions, I'm not ever going to know. And I don't want to be in a room with those people. So I'm quite happy to sit on this side of the fence and not know. But what I did, I just think it's really interesting that there may be some people who generally see what's going on as a holy war, but not just any holy war, like an end times holy war, and that this is bigger than Gaza. This involves like the broader Middle East and in some people's minds, all of humanity, because at some level it's the return of the Messiah and like the judgment of all people, and whether you were on the right side or not. And so it's almost like the ultimate doubling down of this division of like us versus them, and pick a side. I've even seen like American politicians, like senators and things, on TV recently talking about like, well, the Bible says that either you stand with those who stand with Israel will be saved, and those who don't will be damned. And like, and I don't want to be damned. So
I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose my voting population, who are mostly, yeah, anyway,
and all the money that goes with
all the
being in that position in America.
So let's maybe let's expand this out a little bit, because we're kind of very narrowly focused on kind of one kind of end times. But I think well, I think there's this compelling narrative of the end times. I mean, I think one of the things in the even 5-6 years ago was, from a sustainability movement, is very, to a certain subset of the sustainability movement, it was an end times, or it is an end times conversation. I mean, if you go even further back from a more environmentalist, like you mentioned your friend who passed away recently, from the Cold War. I mean, the Cold War, we're kind of like this is like the second guard, the second phase of sustainability, is kind of this carbon story, but previously it was a nuclear war story. And we talk about the Green Party in Germany. Like, one of the reasons they've been just getting rid of all nuclear power stations is because there's belief that nuclear was like an end of times. You mentioned the doomsday clock, the end of times situation. I've seen people back talking about 2030, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Literally, we're all going to die. And we're like, no, what? Why are you saying that?
And I think a lot of the media around climate change has put, particularly in young people, that kind of fear of end times through the climate change narrative of, like, whether it's whatever year it is, whether it's 2030, 2050, 2100, whatever it is. It's like, if we don't hit certain targets by certain dates, then that is literally the end of the world.
Yeah.
And that's why there's so much fear. And a lot of people are genuinely terrified, because they think that, like, the end is coming because we're not hitting our targets.
Yeah.
So that means, and we've been told if we don't hit the targets, we're doomed. Yeah, exactly. We failed on our KPI. So God's going to say, you're fired. Like, come on, guys, get out of here.
So it's fear again. We've covered this before.
Yeah,
we're back here again. It's like the end. Like, why do end of times why are end of times narratives so compelling? It's because they trigger your fear response. And as a ancient species that were like walking around a forest, it would be like, the big bear's coming. End of times, you better run. And we're kind of hardwired to respond to fear more than, because you will survive more if you respond to fear with a greater prejudice than if you respond to a benefit of something.
Yeah, exactly. And the difference is that when the bear comes and you get scared, just like an antelope or a zebra or whatever, you get really, really scared temporarily. You get yourself out of danger, and then you shake it off, and then you just carry on with your day, right?
Yeah. But we're not.
Whereas we live in chronic fear, so we never shake it off, because it's just always, there's these things that are just there, like the threat of war. It's just hovers, or the threat of climate change. It just hovers there perpetually over our heads, and so that means that we're like constantly in this sort of, don't know what the word is, but it's a sort of, it's just chronic, a more compliant, depressed state as a population. And I'm not even saying that in a conspiratorial way, that there is an angle to that, but even just like, if it just is what it is, it still means that we're not sort of we're not living our lives to the full. We're not at our most creative. We're not. We're because when you're in that state of fear, like, certain parts of your brain shut down because you're in that. You're in that sort of crisis response state, rather than a kind of more open, loving, creative place where you can do other things. So it's not like a great place.
It's like chronic conditions in your body as well. Like, if you're chronically, like, if you like fundamentally is just like in a fearful state all the time. We talked about it before, like the nocebos and the placebos. Like, you will switch your body into like accepting, like, you're gonna die anyway, so you might as well just take the bacterial viral cyanide pill and just be done with it. Yeah, and so we're chronically afraid. I do think that's kind of like the thing that I mean, from my perspective, that is really, when I go back to kind of my awakening, my red pilling, it was just more like just I'm just tired of being afraid, just
Yeah.
tired, just
Yeah.
tired of being angry and afraid all the time and being made to feel it. And I'm not saying I'm immune to it now, but it's just like you recognize it. You recognize it when people are like, "You're trying to make me afraid." I'm not going to be, or I am, but I'm not going to tell you I am.
Well, this is it. I think once you've seen that, like, we live in this state of chronic fear, and that a lot of that fear is being projected onto us all the time, then it's easier to notice it within yourself and start trying to actually overcome it. And it doesn't mean that there aren't real challenges in the world. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't mean that there aren't bad things happening. It doesn't mean there aren't environmental problems that need solving. But living in the state of fear is not the solution to those problems. And it may even, maybe not in the case of climate change, maybe not in the case of environmental issues specifically, but social issues, living in the state of fear actually perpetuates the problems, because it amplifies this sort of negativity between people, the division between people. People then crave safety, so they're more likely to want to cling on to an identity, cling on to belief in some leader who's going to like save them. And so it's actually a really dangerous thing. Whereas when people actually kind of step back and try to feel like, find that sort of inner safety and not be kind of driven by, we've got the whole thing of like doom scrolling. You know, it's sort of, it highlights the state of our like collective psyche. It's like that's what people do. They doom scroll. Like, I've never heard anybody talking about hope scrolling. You know, it's just you know, it's not a thing.
Fun, is it?
Yeah,
hope scroll or comedy scrolling maybe.
Comedy scrolling, yeah. There's definitely scrolling. That. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, I mean, there's an aspect to this is the, again, it's our fault, Tom. We did this. We connected the world together with digital technology. We made information available, you know, instantly and irresponsibly, without you know. And now, instead of just being, if all the information that flowed into me was like the threats to Crawley, I'd be all right. But now I'm thinking about the threats to the UK, immigration, digital ID, war, global war, and it's kind of all just flooding in.
Too much.
It's too much. One of the things I used to do, which I don't do anymore, was maybe, I don't know, I don't want to not do this, but for quite a significant period of my life, I stopped reading all news, and I wouldn't say I was happier, but I think there were other issues going on with my life. But I certainly wasn't caught up in the shenanigans of the world, and I don't know, things worked out all right.
Yeah. No, I also,
or at least if I was engaged, I wouldn't have done anything. I wouldn't.
Well, this is it.
Done anything about it.
Yeah. Well, this is it, because if you actually think about the way the news is presented, it's not about solutions. It is just about telling you bad things that happen and making you feel depressed and sad and angry and afraid. You don't watch the news and get to the end of it like, okay, well, like, even if it was just about Crawley, let's just say, that would be less overwhelming, but it would still be really negative. And so you'd end up forming this really whenever, I don't really listen to the radio much these days, but if I do sometimes listen to the radio in the car, like the local radio, the news about Southampton. I mean, if I commuted to work every day from here, and I listened to local radio, I would be terrified of going into Southampton. Like, the local news is always like someone's been stabbed and there's been a mugging, and, you know, like some guy murdered his wife, and, you know, it sounds, you know, there's some like drug cartel working in the docks, you know. There's always something terrible going on. And yet, if I don't listen to the local news, I go into Southampton, and it's not the greatest town in Britain. Like, it's a bit dreary, but it's all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Like, I'm not going there
yeah.
like thinking that there's like danger on every corner, which some people are. Like people, I know people who live around here who are like, oh, I don't go into Southampton. It's like
Really?
because they listen to the local news, and
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whereas it's never saying like, oh, you know what, there's like a drug problem in Southampton, and here's like a program that's being like initiated to try and help address the root
Yeah.
causes. And if you want to support this program to address the root causes, then we're looking for these types of people to get involved, and we need some funding for this. Like it's not just like a solution focused certain news
Yeah.
service. We're like, yeah, there's some
Oh,
problems, but we're going to solve them together. That would be okay.
I remember because in my youth, I used to find it really hard to listen to any news or any documentary about anything to do with the environment, because it would just make me sad and depressed.
Mm.
And I always wondered, like, why can't at the end of the news you just have like a link? So this is the bad thing that's happened. If you want to help, just click this
Right.
link.
Yeah.
And I'd be
Yeah.
like, do you know what? I wasn't too fussed about the lion thing, and I wasn't fussed about the other thing, but I care about this. I'm going to click that link and give you something to do. Remember, it's one of the reasons why I was like starting off in this whole green software space, because I was like, I just want to give people something to do. It's as simple as just, code your apps a bit better.
Yeah. Do something
It's not going to
tangible.
solve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not going to save the world by yourself, but you just give people some hope to do something.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. Everybody chip in where they can. It actually creates a culture of feeling like we're moving towards solutions. We're moving towards something
Yeah.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note,
Yeah.
no, go on. You had something.
No, I was just, you could go. You go.
So the Abrahamic religions, it seems very much like apocalyptic. There is an end time. Well, and I say that, I mean, it might be that the Messiah comes and then all the like chosen people get saved. So those people is not the end times. But in some other cultures, it's more cyclic. So, for example, in ancient Greek, they had this idea of like the Great Ages, and like Bronze Age, Silver Age, Gold Age. Starting with the iron, bronze, silver, gold. And it goes in a cycle. And you had a similar thing. We've talked about this once before in an early episode. You had a similar thing in Hinduism. Yeah. So you have the yugas, which we go through, and supposedly we're in the Kali Yuga. And then you've got like various Native American tribes, like the Sui, I don't know how to pronounce it, tribe. They have this idea of like the buffalo, which like initially it has 4 legs, and then we enter this new age of humanity and it loses a leg. There's like some sort of battle and it loses a leg. So it's a 3-legged buffalo. And then at the end of that age, there's another battle and it loses another leg and it's only got 2 legs. And then eventually, as you can fathom, finally there's an age where it loses another leg, and it's this 1-legged buffalo that can barely balance itself. And, and some believe that like we're in that age. Similarly, the Hopi have this like cyclical idea of these ages where you go through effectively the same kind of idea of like kind of up to a golden age, or down, actually starting in a golden age and going down to where we are now, the 4th world, which is like the Kali Yuga in Hinduism. And it's this age of materialism and selfishness and like low consciousness. And then some people believe that because all the ancient texts and like oral traditions and stuff, they're very kind of patchy. So there's different interpretations, but some believe that at the end of the Dark Age, effectively, which is the lowest point, which seems like from some of these cultures believe that that's what we've been in for thousands of years, and we're approaching the end of it, which should be a good thing. So some believe that you at the end of that, you go through some sort of like end of the world scenario, and then you enter the golden age. You just got to get through it. Some believe that you go through that it's actually a sine wave, effectively. So which I think to me makes more sense, but that you start climbing back up again. So you've been going sort of downhill, and then there's a sort of turning point and you start going back uphill. But they all seem to say that like at the transition points between, although there's like always like there's always evolution, whether we're not like literally biological evolution necessarily, though some do believe that, but evolution of society, of culture. So there's always some sort of gradual evolution of culture, but then you have these like sort of flashpoints where it really like changes gear significantly. And these happen every few thousand years. And that this might be one of them. And so you've got like the Mayan long count calendar famously ended in
And
21st of December 2012, and it was like,
Yeah.
it's the end of the world. And then on the 22nd of December, we're all still here.
yeah.
And everything just carried on. And then, like, you know, there's another more recent calculation about like the Hindu Yugas, and the Kali Yuga ended this year in March, this
You
year,
mentioned
March
something.
2025.
Yeah.
And then some people would say, oh, well, clearly it was wrong because the world didn't end. But if you take them from the perspective of like a sort of a cyclic cosmology of how human culture moves through over long periods of time, over thousands of years, then maybe they make some sense, because if there are these sort of flashpoints that sort of shift gear, the idea is it's like anything in life, that it goes in as some sort of a sine wave, and at some point like pressure builds, and then that pressure, once it reaches a certain flashpoint, it bursts. That is what you call a calamity of some kind, whether it's a war or just some sort of like political revolution or whatever it is. Although obviously a lot of these cultures bring in like natural phenomenon as well into these. And then after that, civilization sort of starts to build itself back up again in a different way. And depending on which side of the curve you're on, after that flashpoint, it either starts rebuilding itself in a degraded way because now everything's like even worse, or it actually is like the sort of the reemergence after, you know, like after a fire, where you can get this sort of blossoming of new life that comes about. And the Greek calendar is interesting because it's basically, you know, it ties in with the zodiac. And so the dates are really vague. Like I haven't found anything that's really like hard, like conclusive on the dates, but it's interesting just like that it's fairly well accepted that we've been in the age of Pisces for a fair while, a couple of thousand years. And the age of Pisces is the fish. Fish is the symbol of Christianity and so on, which is also interesting. Another rabbit hole to dive down. And that then in the zodiac after Pisces comes Aquarius. And Aquarius is like an age that is supposed to be, as the 1960s song, The Age of Aquarius, tells us.
I know. I was listening
This
to that
is
today.
the dawning of the age of Aquarius. and apparently everything's amazing in the age of Aquarius. And hence all the hippies in the 60s were very excited about it, and it hasn't come yet. But
No, a couple of 100 years, I think.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But the Greek thing is interesting because there's this idea that after like a full cycle, you've been through all of the ages. And after a full cycle, there's this, at both ends, there's these like buffer periods that before you start the cycle again. And at the end of the cycle, it's called ekpyrosis, which has the word pyro in it, which is ominous. But it's basically this period of like a great fiery transition. And whether fiery means actual fire or whether fiery just means like kind of socially, politically hot. You know, who knows? But it sort of like cleanses away. It's a period of cleansing, essentially. It cleanses away the evil and all of the kind of the things that have been polluting the world or polluting our minds, and then humanity reemerges more evolved, wiser, more loving, benevolent, and starts getting itself on a good track.
All these stories are too too hopeful. I
Too
find like
hopeful.
the future. Yeah, like the future is just like, listen, it's a bit shit right now, but it's gonna get better. Just it's gonna get better. There's gonna be
Yeah.
another age, maybe the next one, but the one after. There's gonna be a good
Well,
age. The reason
what
you're feeling a bit, yeah.
whether they're hopeful though depends on how long you think you're going to live and which side of the curve
Well,
you're on. Because if you're on the downward
well,
slope of the curve, then there's no hope really.
well, no, you'll be like, well, there's another age. There'll be another age coming after this age where it's gonna be better.
Just give it 3,000
I,
years.
you give it 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Well, I think also it's like the because that's one of the I was messaging you before. That's one of the thoughts about this, like the situation that we're in. So I was thinking about it also from like again sustainability and systems thinking, and how there are these with all these different variables and pressures and forces throughout the world, which seems kind of fairly chaotic. Despite that, there are these stable points where things kind of like revert to this kind of stable area. And like even with the earth, like despite all the things going on, it kind of relatively like stable around this place. And then what everybody's worried about is like not like a linear gradation upwards, but like we're going to reach a tipping point where it kind of flips. Like when you have like a lot of ice on the planet, it reflects a lot of heat, which makes it harder to heat up, which kind of keeps the ice present. So there are these moments of like rapid transitions into a different stable point. And when you talk about different ages, that's what I think about is like there are these all the forces kind of and the flows kind of like just create this stable point. And we as a society might have just moved there, and the I was wondering like whether the tension and the pressure that we felt as a energetically as a society is us kind of just slightly we feel as a global population that we're just there's a lot of we're at that inflection point, but there's a lot of pressure to bring us down here, or we're gonna flip over
Yeah.
to the other side. Which kind of brings into account kind of like what is our then you could actually consider all the sustainability movement as conservatives because their purpose is no this is the stable this is the age
This is
that we
the
want.
status quo we want to maintain.
This is the status quo we want here, like we want to stay here and kind of accelerate. They're all like no we want to get to whatever this new state is. We just want to get there, and once we get there there'll be this stable thing. And from an environmental perspective it'll be very it won't be that a lot of people die. A lot of people will be in a lot of suffering for quite a while, but then 2,000 years in the future, there'll be another stable place where, the Sahara will be like the best place on the planet to like have a house. I've got my house on the Sahara.
House in the
Yeah,
Sahara.
it's really brilliant.
Yeah.
So green outside.
Which
But,
probably
you'll have this
will,
other-
there will be a phase of the Earth where that would be the case at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like so when you talk about end of times, I was like, yeah, end of times. It's also the beginning of times. I don't think end of times for me that never. I mean, unless you're talking, even if you're talking about nuclear disaster, which a million years in the future will be all right again. So there's these kind of like it's a transitionary moments. There's just a very important tipping point, whether it's environmental or something else. There is this almost energetic age-like tipping point. And that is, even when we're talking about the holy war in Israel and kind of maybe that is representative of this understanding that they want to try and bring about this kind of tipping point, this new age. Maybe I don't believe in the Messiah story, but maybe maybe that's kind of like.
But essentially, that's what it is, because for them, and when I say them, I mean the people who believe in that. The coming of the Messiah ushers in literally a new age.
New age
that is like a golden age for their people, essentially, after what has previously been an age of oppression. So it is literally that, and I think on some level what you're saying is probably true, that even if whatever the reasons might be, but like in terms of environmental tension, like whether it's natural shifts or man-made problems, probably like, various different things, but it's like a perfect storm, really, of things
Mm.
coming together. And that on some level, some of our social tension may also be driven subconsciously by that. Like even if you're not somebody who's like really environmentally minded, there may just be something sort of that we
Or,
sense that
or there's
things
something,
are a struggle.
underneath both of those, and there's
Mm.
this like essential force that we're feeling is transitioning us to a different place, a different way of being, maybe even bring in AI. Like this all feels like this. I mean, when you talk about the technocrats of our age, they believe that kind of AI is like, what has Joe Rogan said on the podcast? I find it the most horrific. I listen to Joe Rogan a lot. It's not like I hate the guy, but he said something I thought was horrific, which was, um, we are the bootloader for the AI consciousness. So we existed to just load AI into the universe, and then we can just disappear. But the purpose of our existence is to bring AI. And I was like, oh, I don't like. But it's that whole idea of the same of the end. It's the end of time, end of human times, and the beginning
Right,
of AI times.
exactly.
It's still the same.
Yeah.
You know.
And we have
Yeah.
a lot of things coming together that are that tie in with this. Like obviously we started off talking about things like, you know, sort of war in Israel and so on. But we've got the environmental problems which have these hard deadlines on them. But then we also have like the emergence of artificial intelligence like happening at
Yeah.
the same point in history.
Yeah.
And we have, though most people won't have it on their radars, we also have this like absolutely bizarre sort of acceleration of UFO disclosure happening at this point in
Yeah.
history, which is
Yeah.
super fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, why is this all happening now? And then you have, you talk about the technocrats. They're all building bunkers. Like this is the this
Yeah,
is
I'd build a
really
bunker.
interesting,
Yeah.
right? Like they're
Yeah. Yeah.
spending
Yeah.
millions on bunkers, some
Yeah.
of them very quietly, some of them showing off about it because there's a bit of a status thing. And I think some of them are just doing it because they're like, oh, he's got a bunker, I want one. But it's a way of showing how rich you are. But
Well,
like,
if you had 100 billion, I'd comfortably spend 100 million on a bunker. It would be like, well, it's like, I wouldn't even say they think it's going to happen. They'll be just like, well, if it does, I'd rather have a bunker. It's not going to cost me much, just 100 million.
it's
It's like,
pocket change. You might as well have one.
pocket change. Yeah,
Yeah.
might as well have one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Douglas Rushkoff, the guy who wrote Siberia, the
Yeah.
book, he he went,
I'm reading
I don't
it.
know when it was, to a meeting. He got invited to give a talk actually at a conference.
Yeah.
And he went to this conference, and when he got there was no conference. And basically it was a way of getting him into a private meeting with some very, very wealthy people in
Wow.
America
Yeah.
who wanted to pick
Yeah.
his brain about how to what he thinks they should do on a whole bunch of
Right.
fronts to survive the
Yeah.
apocalypse, including asking him questions about like, how should we design our bunkers to make sure that they're like foolproof for any event. And he calls it he refers to it as the event. It's like a euphemism for
this event of his life. Yeah. Oh yeah,
well,
because it was an actual
for
event.
what these elites as a sort of a class of people at this current point in history think might be coming. And he said like it could be environmental collapse, it could be social unrest, it could be a nuclear war, it could be a solar storm, it could be a pandemic, it could be some sort of like computer hack that like completely takes down society. So they're sort of trying to make themselves sort of invincible to any of these things, because most of those things would probably like well, some of them might be very long term, but there's probably like a pinch point where it's like there's a sudden shock. So you go in your bunker, you can stay there for weeks, months.
Well, that is Elon's like multi-planetary species like
Right.
vision. Like that's his whole thing. It's like, listen, we've got to hedge our bets because there's always weird interviews where he seems to know something about something or other happening, and there's like they all seem to know something about something or other happening. There was talking about there's a really interesting. I was going to send it you. There's a really interesting Joe Rogan episode recently, which is so weird. It was so serendipitous, given the fact that we're having this conversation. That I listened to that. I was actually on the way back because we just the audience doesn't know, but we just met each other physically. And I drove back, and I was
we were together in person yesterday.
We were together in person. We had a high quality, high step count interaction. Greg Braden,
yeah.
And it was a really interesting, quite out there on some parts, which is very interesting. A lot of stuff on about UFOs and, well, maybe not UFOs, but alien intelligence and other things. But he was, well, he forget all about all of that. I'm going to go off massive topic, but he mentioned this really interesting, and I'd never heard about it. I felt it was very compelling how he expressed this idea of good versus evil, and he expressed it as this ancient battle that's been at play of good versus evil. And my initial thought was like, oh, God damn it. I mean, what is good? What is evil?
Yeah.
Somebody's good if somebody else is evil, blah, 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 blah. It's just what side you're on. But then he actually managed to convince me with a very interesting argument, which was like there's this essential nature of humans that is very unique. Actually, he linked it to the fact that 200,000 years ago, there seems to be a very weird DNA anomaly in human evolution where our genes seems to have been fused in a way which is impossible to happen in an evolutionary perspective. And
I've seen him talk about that.
Yeah. Then it's been left on like the blockchain of our DNA, which at least alludes to some intervention from some other party. But then he expressed this idea about how us as humans, we have this kind of unique quality of existence that is unique to other animals and creatures around, which is like our imagination, which is more than just the ability to imagine, and therefore through imagining, then okay, I'm going to build it. It's things we put like manifestation, like our ability to manifest a reality around us is kind of like this magical quality that we have as human beings. And that is what effectively the good force of the world is all about, is helping us to realize and understand our ability and our unique magical qualities as human beings to imagine and to create, especially creation and this world. And the evil forces of the world are there to specifically help us to dampen our abilities to imagine and to create and to kind of, if this was like a magical ability we have, was to kind of like just dampen on it. And that is kind of this eternal force between good and evil, is like us trying to like really express ourselves. And, we've spoken in the past, and it kind of made sense because we've spoken in the past about how I do believe we had these other abilities in our past to do things, and it seems to have dampened. And he postulated, he was saying the same thing. He was saying that 2030 seems to be around 2030 seems to be a very interesting convergence of many things. Like he mentioned about sustainability, he mentioned about AI. A lot of apparently AI companies are on one hand talking about like super intelligence happening at like 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033. Around that time, we've got wars, we've got all these other things kind of coming to a convergence at 2030. And he's saying this is like this epic battle, like, which is, oh God, it triggers so many like exciting things inside. Epic battle, good versus evil, all the good stuff, coming to force. And again, like he was expressing this kind of end of times narrative with this other, and this other kind of more meta dimension of good versus evil, which I loved. My God, it triggered all my sci-fi bones. It was like perfect. It was a perfect storm.
I wonder how much of that, like the excitement of like battle of good versus evil, is like innate in us as humans, and how much of that is conditioning in our culture. When I say our culture, I mean just sort of civilized, in inverted commas, culture going back thousands of years, because it is this sort of us versus them dynamic in good versus evil. I wonder like where
our tribe versus their tribe, but we're the good tribe, they're the evil tribe. It's like so
Yeah.
base. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
My youngest, it's so interesting because I mean, all kids these days, they watch, cartoons and this and that and the other, but he's really obsessed with goodies and baddies. He's
Yeah.
really upset. Really upset. He's like, when someone's done something bad, you're a baddie. You're a baddie. And then he's a goodie, and he wants to be a goodie. He wants to be one of the goodies. Now, today I'm going to be a baddie. And like, it's cute to one level. Another level, I'm like, he's forming his worldview of the world in terms of there are good people and bad people.
Yeah. It's
And he's
binary.
been in binary, and he's been indoctrinated into it because he just watches the heck. I'll watch it with him, like Spider-Man and his amazing friends, little cartoons. It's like the goodies, very
It's all about
simplistic
good versus
narrative,
bad, isn't it? Yeah.
all about good versus bad. And I don't know.
Yeah,
He's
and I
probably
think the
going to be quite.
sustainability movement, to a large extent, and we sort of touched on this before, is driven by, whether it's subconsciously, a need of people to want to feel like they're a goodie, they're on the right side of
Yeah.
history, they're doing the right things. But then equally, there are people who, like you said, some days your kid wants to be a baddie, right?
Yeah.
There's this, like, sometimes being a goodie can feel like you're being told, you're having to conform and do what you're told to do, and then that can feel stifling, and especially when, like, maybe what they're being told makes them a goodie doesn't align with, like, who they truly are, so then they want to rebel and be a baddie. And because it's binary, you sort of feel like you've got to take a side rather than exploring the messy middle of the fact that nothing's quite that clear cut.
Because the thing is, like, even when the sustainability movement, we think, like, the people think, oh, we're good, they're bad. And what does that really translate to in your head? You're literally thinking them as, like, I'm gonna screw over and it's not. They think they're good, and you're bad. They think, like, I know people who work in the oil and gas industry, and they're like, listen, we're bringing energy to the world. There's no single other thing that we can do as a society to lift up people from poverty than to give them energy and access to energy. It is linked proportionally to the GDP, to the well-being of a country, is their access to energy. So you are the baddie by forcing people to, like, not get access to energy. So they literally think of you as the baddie. So everybody, the Israelis think they're goodies, and the Hamas thinks they're goodies. Like, everybody thinks they're good. Everybody thinks they're the goodies.
Well, everyone thinks that they're a goodies or baddies. Yeah,
goodies.
Everyone thinks they're a goodie.
Everybody.
It's like,
no one. I don't think anybody in this world is running around going, "We're doing this because we're the baddies." Americans deposing, like, leaders all over the world and regime changing. They weren't doing it because, well, maybe the upper echelons, but, like, the people as a whole weren't behind it because they were like, oh, we're Americans and we're bad people. We love going in and regime changing. It's because they thought they were the goodies. They've been taught that they're the goodies.
Yeah, exactly. Even when it seems completely unfathomable how somebody could think that that's the right thing to do. Like, people have their own narratives in their heads. And, you spoke earlier about, sort of totalitarian leaders and so on, and, the horrific things they do. But in their own heads, however delusional it may be, they'll have some sort of story that they're telling themselves about why this is the right thing to do, why it needs to be done, and whatever it might be. Yeah.
So what's our story? Like, go on.
What is our story? Yeah, that's a good question, because I think if I'm being honest, I'd say one of my general principles in life for all my adult life really has always been to try to make sure that the world is better because I'm here than if I wasn't. That's sort of I can never measure that. You can't put it on a graph, but it's a sort of rule of thumb success metric that, like, well, if I think broadly speaking, like if I hadn't been here, the world might not be quite as good. The
thing is, Tom, everybody thinks the same thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's not objective. But the difference is, this doesn't make it good or bad. But the difference is, I think there are people who are proactive in trying to do what they think is the right thing, even if somebody else thinks that they are the devil. And then there are people who are just blasé and they just don't really care. They just kind of drift along.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but Hitler was proactive.
He was proactive. No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that the actual actions are good or bad. It's just there's a sort of broad categorization of like, well, are you trying or not trying? I don't know what difference that actually makes in terms of the moral outcome, because you could be highly delusional and be really passionate, and you would be very destructive. Whereas somebody who is just like, meh, not really bothered, just tick along, just get up, live my life every day, don't make a fuss, would be relatively harmless. And it'd be like, well, if Hitler had been that guy, the world would be a much better place, you know?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Maybe passiveness is being passive and unfussed. If everybody was passive and unfussed, there cannot be no holy wars.
If everybody was, I think it would be good. Well, to some extent be good. But if you have most people passive, which I think is the case, I think most people are relatively passive, and then you have a small minority of people who are like very proactive. Obviously, there's a scale; it's not binary. But I think the people who are highly proactive tend to be at the more destructive end of the scale, just because they have such a craving for power and status and wealth and whatever it is they're craving.
Green Party in Germany, through their belief in the negativeness of nuclear power, got the nuclear power stations shut down. So now the environmentalists in Germany are like, whoa, now we have no nuclear power. Now we're building up loads of coal power plants and gas power plants. So now it's kind of like everybody is doing what they think is good, but there's no... It just doesn't make any... It's just... everybody's just doing what they think is good. And there's no ability. And nothing's good. It's like yin and yang. Nothing is good.
Yeah.
Everything that you do has some evil, and everything you do
It's an illusion that there is this binary good and bad.
Tom, what's the point? What's the point of it all?
What's the point of it all?
What's the point of it all? We're doing... We've given up with our early pattern of the podcast, which was trying to solve things. But it's just, I wish we would. I wish we would solve something.
We've abandoned solving.
We've abandoned trying to come up with the what we're supposed to do. But
no, but I think what you've touched on is something far more profound than you realize, that in terms of giving up on trying to solve things. Because I think, like, if you're like a member of Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil, and you're trying to solve things because you're trying to like stop fossil fuels, and you think you're doing something proactive and you think that's good, which maybe it is, but then you're an oil executive and you think that like bringing energy to people is a great thing. If you genuinely, that's their perspective, and which on some level is also true, and then they think that Extinction Rebellion are evil and so on. But the point is, it's very much focused on the things that you're doing, the solutions. The solution is we need to stop oil, or the solution is we need to pump more oil. And but the consequence, the consequence is division of people. And I think actually unity of people is more important than the things that we're fighting over. If it, like Vanita and I have had this conversation many times. I mean, like we don't argue over many things, but we've often had this conversation that like if there is something that we're like really struggling to agree on, our relationship with each other is more important than the thing we're arguing about. However important we think that thing we're arguing about might be, that is always secondary. And if you scale that up to humanity as like 8 billion people, I think that's sort of the thing we've forgotten, that it's like, like Israel's like, oh, but Hamas did this, and there's like this prophecy we need to fulfill, and then Hamas are like, oh no, but we're oppressed, and we need to stop the prophecy from being fulfilled, and like whatever, right? But ultimately, they're like, people are dying, people are starving, people are living in these like terrible conditions, and none of that really in comparison, none of that really matters. Like if all of humanity said, you know what, I've got ideas on what I think is good and bad, but I'm always going to prioritize the unity of people and us just getting along, I think we'd somehow find a way of solving the other things, and the world would be a much better place. But we're always arguing over the tangible things rather than the relationship among humans.
I think it also comes back to what I was, and I do believe this. It's like you're from the start, you're imbued with all this negativity about yourself, about the world. There's the fear everywhere. The fear may be so profound. I think it was, I've forgotten his name now. I'm gonna lose it if I try and remember his name, but he was being interviewed by Theo Von, and he was being asked about, he was explaining how Palestinian children feel about themselves, and it was so profound. He was a psychologist, child psychologist, and it was like, when you're born in a war-torn area, when you see like the entire world like destructed around you, you internalize it into, it was because of me. The reason that all these people died around me is because of me. The reason all these buildings died is because of me. I'm a piece of shit, and that's why this stuff happened to me. And so like that is what's imbued into you at the start. And then on the other side, someone says, do you know what, if you follow my religion, if you believe in this creed, I'll show you a way that you're not a piece of shit. And it's through this fight, this oppression, this like, we're better than them. I'm going to show you that as a collective, it's kind of like imbues it into you. Whereas the solution to everything is the whole universe not feeling like, if you're talking about, it's like, it's the lessons from all of the awakenings, all the spiritual awakenings is a self-healing. It's like a self-healing. Exactly. Like if you were healed yourself, everybody healed themselves, you wouldn't feel that way. You wouldn't, they wouldn't be able to get you. They wouldn't be able to convince you. You're like, no, I'm all right. I feel great. I'm worthy. It's okay. Thank you, but no. So I think, again, coming back to what was one of our very first episodes, and you were talking about what is sustainability, is kind of like the self-healing of us and the universe, and we just need to get there, which is like, Christ, so hard.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that really ties in with, like, for example, like the Hopi philosophy that they believe we're coming to the end of the fourth world and we can't avoid, like, we can't physically keep everything static and the way it is. Like, we will transition into the next world, but that the most important thing is what they describe as purifying our hearts and finding peace within ourselves and trying to find sort of love and forgiveness for not just other human beings, but like all of life in the cosmos. And the more that we can do that, the more smoothly we will pass through this transition, the less painful and disruptive it will be. And to me, that just makes a lot of sense. And it feels like something that is very much, even if you don't believe in the prophecy and you don't believe in, like, Hopi cosmology and any of these other things, it's just like a fundamentally good thing to do, is just to try to work on yourself and find peace within yourself and find love and acceptance for all other living beings. It's like, well, like, like, I just like, there's one thing that I think there's probably not much of a downside to. I'm sure we can find one, but I think
nothing would get done.
Nothing would get done.
Nothing would get done. No one would build iPhones.
Yeah.
No, but I think, I mean, it goes back to, um, I think we just answered our question that we struggled with. Like, well, maybe I've come to accept the answer that you gave in one of our first episodes, was like, what is sustainability? And I think like sustainability is that, as you say, like unity and coming into yourself, which isn't just solving the problem of how do we like sustain like the ecosystems of the planet, but it's because I was thinking about that recently, which is, if we accept the fact that we are on this precipice and things are going to move forward and we are going to tipping, we are just, whether you want to consider it from an environmental perspective or a spiritual perspective or an energetic or whatever it is, or political perspective, we are on like a tipping point and we seem to be heading over to the other side.
Yeah.
As like sustainability to me feels like helping nurturing that transition to have the least suffering that we could possibly have, and it will be suffering involved in that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like that, to me, that's something I can align to, and I feel like I can align to that. Yeah.
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 Yeah, exactly. That feels like a nice place to wrap up.
Yeah, that's good. I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot,
All
mate.
right.
Good. Great
Thanks,
chatting
Justin.
again. Keep on the
Yeah.
same. All right. Catch you there. Bye.